Okay, question 3, the self-checking thing with the level debt, level principal, and Q complex. All three of these are related. The level debt, level principal are also, they're all related to this. And what actually is going to happen on the third, or this, well, technically the fifth tab, the Q complex, is breaking stuff out that comes out of these. So start with the level debt. This annual payment is just a permutation of the present value equation. It's just rearranged. So to do this, and so some of you didn't have any problem doing this, but for anybody that might have had a question, I'll go ahead and work it out. Start with the equal sign to indicate to Excel that you want it to calculate something. Make sure you put a negative sign, not a negative and an equal sign, in front of the payment, just like the PV, because it tells the math which way the money's flowing. And it's absolute. If you leave it out, it will not work right. Whether you do it on here, you do it on a calculator. The math doesn't work right. So we're going to use the built-in payment function, which is, it says the definition. It calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and constant interest rate. There is a version of this, just in case you're interested for whatever reason. There is a version of this where they do irregular rates of return, and that's an IRR, irregular rate of return calculation, which is more complex. And doing it on the spreadsheet is way more fun than doing it even on a business calculator. So if you ever have to do it, use that. Okay, now the payment equation has three things. You need to do the rate, you need to know the number of years, and then the present value, the principal amount. So put this in by cell, the rates first. So we want it to use, what is that, cell C5. Next term is the term in years, so that's C6. And then the present value is C4. Close, pop that up, and ta-da. There's our annual payment. This is very useful to know. Now, level principal. Excuse my coughing again. So I get a cough drop out here and not make you listen to me coughing. All right, level principal. Now the level principal is this is really not too difficult to do. It's a little onerous because you're gonna have to put a lot of this stuff in. Modify the equation each time. I think I'm using Office 365 to do this. In earlier versions, in a lot of these, you can actually just plug in the formula and copy and paste the formula. For some reason, when I try to do it, it's probably a compatibility issue with an older version of Excel and the new and improved ultra modern whiz bang version. In some of these sheets it lets me do it, some it doesn't. I tested this earlier when I was doing a recording of this earlier. I tried to do it and it didn't want to work, so I am leaving that out of this particular spreadsheet. So I started this recording over. All right, level principal. All right, first, principal outstanding. In year one, it's just what you started with. Now, rather than put this in, because remember, I keep telling you that when you set the spreadsheet up, when you set something up like this, you spend time and effort doing the calculations. If you reference cells rather than the actual cell value, then if you want to do this for something else, all you have to do here is plug in different numbers and hit F9 and allow this to recalculate. So here, cell 1, rather than put 111,100,000 here, we'll just put in that this is equal to cell B5, which is the cell that has that value in it. So now, if you change this, this would automatically change. Now, I'm going to do this right across the line and show you how this works, and I'll do a couple of lines and then You should be able to do the rest, and then I'll show you kind of like what goes down here. That's simply the subtotal, but I'll go through the stuff of that just in case. All right, now we want to know the interest. Now, in the case of this, we want to know the interest on this amount for. We're not going to have to do this incremental. Remember, in a previous spreadsheet, we raised it to a power, and here, since we're going to calculate that for every year, and this principal, we're dropping it down. We're subtracting whatever we paid and repaid in principal. That number goes in here and it gets smaller. We don't have to raise anything to a power and do the math. We're just going to do it like manually, step by step. Remember earlier in the previous spreadsheet, I said there's more than one way to skin a cat here. This is just the way we're doing it for this. As long as the math works, I don't care how you put it in. I've seen it half a dozen different ways, but this is the way that I'm doing it. Feel free to follow or not as you like. All right, we want to tell Excel to perform a math calculation. We want to know how much interest on whatever's in B5, so we'll tell it whatever's in B5. We're going to multiply that times the interest rate. All right, this is a little different from the previous two spreadsheets from 1 and 2. Remember in 1 and 2, we multiplied or we added 1 plus the number. Well, this is different because this cell is formatted as a percentage. Excel will automatically turn that into 105.875 because it knows that that's a percent, so it's just going to do that in the background. So we don't have to add anything here to get it to the numerics that we want. The percent sign in this formatted cell already does it. If it just said 5.875 and nothing else, then we would have to do 1 plus B6 to get the number. All right, so 1 plus B6, and there's our interest for year 1 on 111,000 or 111,100,000 at 5.875% interest rate. It's going to cost you about $6.5 million. Now, principal repaid. We've already figured out, kind of how level debt and stuff works. So this is going to be kind of easy to work with here. The principal repaid, we're going to repay the same amount of principal every year. What's going to change is the amount of interest that we pay. Now, to get the principal repaid here, we simply do this. Equals B5, all right, this amount, the interest, which is this, and we're going to divide it by B7, okay? In other words, we're going to divide 111,100,000 by 20 years. This is the same right down the line because these are equal payments. All right, back up here. There we go. Enter. Since these are equal payments, I can just go right down the line, assuming that I didn't do something stupid there. Let me back up. Paste. Come on. That's what gets happening when you're using a new and improved spreadsheet or new and improved system. All right. So right down the line, you can just copy the same formula in because this is equal principal payments. So right down the line, we'll just copy, and I'm doing it all the way down so I can demonstrate the what you're going to do at the bottom here. So right down the line, same equal payments, nice and simple. All right, now 20 years. We did the math. We know over 20 years that's going to be the principal repaid on a level pay stuff here. So now this is level principal. Let me say this. Level principal. If you do a mortgage, it doesn't work like this. In an amortization table, it's generally a percentage, which you start off with your first payment. You might as well have paid zero principal. It's almost all interest. At the end, it's almost no interest and all principal. This is so that the lending institution, the bank, gets, most of what they get, early up front is interest, i.e. profit. And so the farther along you go, the less profit there's risk, and the more principal repaid. So if you suddenly stop making payments here, they made a buttload of money up here, and you still owe them most of this down here. So which is like here would be at the very end, you'd be paying almost $10,000 in principal and almost nothing in interest. So there you are. All right, now here you want to tally these, because in this case it's just to prove that the principal repaid equals this amount. So simply do the subtotal function and spell it right, usually useful. Use the 9 switch. Once you've done this, you can actually highlight all the cells you want subtotal, and it should automatically put it in. Close the brackets, and voila, there you are. The subtotal for the principal repaid matches the principal outstanding. So you've just proven that by the end of year 20, you've repaid the principal that you had outstanding. Say this works especially because we're doing level principal, but you would still subtotal it even if you were doing an amortization table, which is a little more math and a different spreadsheet, so we're not going to worry about that. All right, now the total debt service. This one is just simply how much your interest plus your principal. In other words, what this equals C11 plus D11. This is simply what you cut a check for. All right. You paid $6.5 million in interest and $5.5 million in principal, and you wrote a check for $12 million. All right. This is generally something that would be useful if somebody, you need to report on a budget, what your current, obligations, for example, your principal outstanding, what your debt service is, which, in other words, in year 1, you have to budget for $12,082,125 if you bought something on these terms. That you're going to have to be able to service that debt. So that's why you would do something like this. Now every year your debt service goes down. You need to know how to calculate how much is going down. All right, now next line. You started out with this outstanding balance, but you've now repaid $5,555,000 in principal. So down here, it is simply this minus this. You now owe $105,545,000. Notice that still says true, so we're all good. So now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to calculate how much interest this is based on this amount now. Smaller amount, so you would expect this amount to go down. B5 times B6, well, now it's B6 times B7. All right, make sure I get the right number here. No, it's still B6, that's right. Da, 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 da. I got it backwards here. B12, which is that number. Come on. B12 times B6. Oh, yeah, and held to the equation. All right. So again, principal repaid, it's just going to be this plus this. So simply equals this plus this. All right, again, true. So all you're doing is subtracting your principal repaid, this number, which is constant through the 20 years, from whatever the current iteration here is. You're multiplying this times the interest rate in each one to get the level of interest. And then whatever that interest is, you're adding to the $5.5 million to get the total debt service. And again, in year 2, you have to budget to cover $11,755,769. Right straight down the line. So this one's actually, it's really not any more difficult to understand. It just gives you, in this case, 20 years worth of data about what in this column, what's your payoff every year. In this column, how much interest you pay in every year. You know this is a constant because you did this as a level principal agreement. And your total debt service in this column is what you need to budget for every year to cover this principal plus this interest. All right? So I'm going to leave this as it is because it's just rinse and repeat all the way down 20 years. At the bottom of this, it's just like this. You just subtotal 9, and then it's E11 through E30, and that will give you a total debt service, which will be significantly more. It'll be all of this plus this will give you the debt service. That number is quite large, about 179 million. All right, let's move on to the Q complex. Q complex. Now this is again, it's the same principal amount, it's the same interest rate, the same term in years. We're doing all the same stuff, but in this case, we're going to do this as a semi-annual service. So instead of paying, say, once a year, we're going to pay twice a year. We're going to pay biannually. This makes this slightly more complex. And, in theory, and I think the book says this shouldn't take more than, say, 15 minutes to do or whatever. The idea is when you do the math, you do the formula. You're supposed to be copy and paste the formula all the way down. It turns out it depends on which version of Office you're using. There's some incompatibilities between the version that was used to create these spreadsheets and the later versions of Excel. So some of these you may have to just actually go in and break down and put in 40 lines worth of stuff. Some of it's fairly simple to do and won't be too tricky. These columns, when you do the formula, you can actually copy the formula, and at least I was able to do it earlier, and just paste the formula all the way down. Now, if you see this, then you're not going to get the formula paste option. It'll look like this, and instead of an A, it'll have this stylized FX. So that would be the one you would click on to just copy a formula. That does not work, at least it didn't work for me, in these that are every other cell. So they're paid out on the half year. And it pays on the half year because if you're paying biannually, it's the half year is your first payment. So principal outstanding, B4, is this amount. Now interest, here's what we're going to do. It's the same interest, like here, 6,527,000 stuff. You figure the interest, it's not half of this because you're going to pay half of this interest up front. The second half payment, the one you're going to pay on the 12-month and the 1-year anniversary, you're only paying. You have you have some additional. You paid some of this differently. So here's how we're going to calculate it. Start with equals. This principal outstanding we're going to work with is in cell B14. So we're going to add that. We're going to multiply B14, the asterisk, and we're going to multiply it by B5, which is the interest rate. However, because we're going to pay this interest in two parts, we're simply going to divide by 2. And according to the spreadsheet, that's true. So this $6,527,125, this is half of that, with a little rounding. Now, same thing here. This line, exactly the same thing. It's the same formula. These two, same formula. These two, same formula. So here, you can actually copy that. Sure, I hit escape, so it actually lets me do that. And I can paste it, and this is fine. Okay? Now, principal repaid. That's simply the it's going to be, well, better go across here. Let me do the total sum, because if you do this, you need to go line by line. Otherwise, you're going to get errors because some of the data you need is actually elsewhere. All right. So total semi-annual service, that's simply C14 plus D14, or you could just say C14. I mean, the effect is the same. Plus D14. See, again, true, because all you paid is interest at this semi-annual payment, your mid-year payment. All right. Now, principal repaid goes like this. You got to trust me on this. Equals F15. Whoops. Needs to be a 1 in there. Minus C14 minus C15. Again, more than one way to skin a cat here. This is going to come up negative until we get to a few more items here. Now, total semi-annual service is this plus this. So we're going to do it like here. Equals this plus this. Now that still isn't right. So let's see what happens here. Yes, it doesn't like that it doesn't like the way I've done the math here. Total annual service is simply this. Now, you should be able to reference this amount. I had trouble getting it to do that, so here's what I'm going to do. It's this equation. So in here, oh, wait a minute, might actually let me do that. That'd be a change that did. Now, these are actually in cell B where they were at cell C earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and change these to B to reference the data that's up here that actually starts in cell C. And I'll do the math. Now, 9,508,145, which is the same as is here. Now, you should, I had trouble doing this. I've had other students using different versions. They should be able to copy this and put it in here. And what would actually be up here was an equals with like a exclamation and it would say level debt exclamation and then reference cell C9. But I couldn't get it to work, so if it works for you, fine. If it doesn't, well, there you are. All right. C4. This is kind of annoying because this is supposed to be. Oh, that's what's wrong. There we go. Typo when I'm trying to come across here. I got ahead of myself. C14 plus D15, which is this amount plus the principal repaid. So you end up with this. So in year one, your principal outstanding, you start with 111,100,000. You paid 3,263,563 twice. All right. You split it in half. You just did the calculation and divided by 2. Then you calculated your principal repaid. Then you figured out what your semi-annual service was, which is this, and then what your total semi-annual service was. Now this is, you've already paid half of the interest, right? That was on the 6-month mark. Now, at the 1-year mark, you're paying the other half of the interest plus the principal, all right, which is this amount. And then the principal, the total annual debt service is this amount, which is these combined, okay? Make sense? Okay, now let's drop down. I'll do this through I'll say through year 3, and then you should be able to just match what I do through the rest of this. And then at the bottom, you do the subtotal with the 9 switch, and then add everything from the 0.5 year to the 20 year, and then put that in every column. So principal outstanding, right? Remember, principal outstanding is simply this minus whatever you repaid. So in this case, equal sign. We're going to start with that, and we're going to subtract that. All right. Now we start over. All right. Interest. Interest is, again, with the equals, it's going to be B16, which is our principal outstanding, times our interest rate, which is B5. And since we're going to pay it, half of it we'll say half of it in July and half of it in January, like a mid-year. So we're going to divide by 2, and there's our mid-year. And since it's the same for the other half of the year, because we're just paying half each time, we can just copy and paste that into the next line. All right. So now your total semi-annual service, in this case, again, it's just like this one. It's this plus this, and since you didn't repay any principal, that defaults to 0. So you could just say it equals C14, or in this case, C16. So it'd be equals this plus this. And since that's locked, it won't put it in. I'm just going to put it in. In fact, I'll tell you what. Let me leave it out, and you just see it still works. Okay. Quit being squirrely here. All right, and you see that's true. All right, principal repaid, just like this. Instead of F15 minus C14 minus C15, it's just going to increment by 1. In this case, or actually by 2 because you're skipping 2 lines. equals F17, okay, where this would be here, minus C16, what we paid in interest up front, minus C17. Mistake there, don't need an underscore. All right. Now, number comes up wrong, but it's because we're referencing a cell that doesn't actually have anything in it yet. This is what it's looking for. Now this, since this is the same, remember we did this in the level principal. The principal repaid was always this. We've already figured out what the level debt annual payment's going to be. Well, this is simply, let's just do it this way so that doesn't keep coming up wrong. Just put this in every cell because it's the same number, it's the same formula. You've already worked it out. Say, theory says that you should be able to just copy this, highlight all of these, and it'll put it in every cell. However, in the later version of Excel, for some reason, that's not working. And rather than waste your time trying to figure out how to make it work, let's just figure out how to do this, and this is as quick as we can do it. So we just copy the formula, and we're just going to paste it into each point. And by casing the formula, again, if you want to do this with different numbers, you just do a little recalculation. Okay, there's your level debt, and in this case, equals subtotal. Don't need any help there. 9 switch. Scroll up to the beginning part. Oh, really? You're going to be that way. All right. F15. Put a colon in there. I don't need help with that because it's all the way down to F. What is the last row? F53. Close the brackets. Not sure why that gave me a negative number. It shouldn't be. Anyway, all right, here. For year 2, we want the total semi-annual service. Remember, the total semi-annual service is it's just going to be what you paid in, you're going to add principal and interest. And so here equals interest plus principal. All right. It looks more ferocious than what it is. And again, here we want to go down, so it's whatever last year's principal was equals last year's principal minus what we repaid in principal the year before, or the half year before, which is this. See, true. All we're going to do here is this. We're going to subtract for this. We're going to subtract this number from this number. And it's just that's going to be the pattern all the way down. You're just subtracting this column, whatever this principal was, from whatever the principal was the year before. That's your next year's starting principal. Because you're paying the interest biannually, but you're only paying the principal annually. Rotten thing about that is you end up paying more interest. Okay? So here, interest rate. Same kind of formula, right? You see this B14, B16. This is going to be B18. All right? Times our interest rate, which is in cell B5. It helps if you don't highlight that. Now, since we're going to pay it biannually, equal amounts, we're going to divide it by 2, and there it is. And since this, on the next final payment, is going to be the same amount, we can just copy this to here. All right? Again, it's true. Now here, again, it's just we're just adding across. So in this case, equals. Now you can either do, in this case it would be C18, which is true, or C18 plus D18, still the same number because this is treated as 0. So do it either way you like. The theory was that if you said to somebody, you should be able to copy that formula and go right down the line and it would just work. Well, I wasn't able to make it work, so do it the hard way. Well, and it's not real hard. All right, principal repaid. Again, same kind of formula. Here, F15 minus C14 minus C15. F17 minus C16 minus C17. Notice the numbers just increment by 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. So just increment your formula by 2 numbers. So this would be, in this cell, it would be F19 minus C18 minus C19. Should I get your... All right. So what you're doing is taking F19, your total annual debt service. You're going to subtract C18, which is your half-year interest. And then you're also going to subtract whatever's in C19, which is the other half of your interest. And that gives you your principal repaid. So it's this amount minus the interest you paid. You're paying this much every year, $9,508,145. This is just telling you every 6 months how much you're paying in interest, because you're figuring out by half year stuff. This is your interest rate, and so now here, all you're simply doing is doing the subtraction. That gives you your principal repaid. Now notice every year, it's your principal repaid's a little bigger, so this number is getting a little smaller, a little faster every 12 months. It increases at an increasing rate. Now, same thing over here. See, all you're doing is adding up interest and principal to get your semi-annual service. Interest and principal, no principal. Interest and principal simply equals interest plus principal. There you go. All right. So this number, do it as a payment using these numbers, and it's exactly the same way it's done here, except see over here, the numbers are in, because they've got an explanation in column B. On the Q-complex spreadsheet, this information is under B. That's why it's not exactly the same formula. So you just go in, plug in the formula with these numbers, copy it in every one of the column F cells, and that gets you your total amount of debt service. This is what you're paying every year on an equal payment. It's just every year you're going to pay a little less interest and a little more principal. And you just keep following these same equation, these same equation, all right? So this is actually more straightforward and easy than it at first looks like. It doesn't take you that long. Just follow the pattern, and everything will work out just fine. It was me. I would do this first, and I would just copy it in every cell. That way, when you're plugging these things in, all these formulas just come up right because this one references this column, right? Your F19 and principal repaid references that column. It's going to come up with an error or problem. It's going to be real negative unless you have this in place. All right, that should get you through this column just fine. Each one of these, do it just like we did here. Oh, that's why it's negative. Stuck a negative in the subtotal. All right, now it's right. I was kind of curious about that. So subtotal, each one of these, remember, equals subtotal. Use the 9 switch, or you'll get an error, and then it'll be, in this case, this cell will be E15 through E53. This one is going to be D15 through 53, right across the board, and all these numbers should add up. So here, you'll get the total interest you paid over 20 years. This principal repaid should equal this. Total semi-annual service will tell you what you, that'll give you the numbers that you paid out over the entire year, and it should be identical to this number. This number and this number should be the same number. This is how you did it semi-annually. This is what it was when you added it together. Make sense? All right, that shouldn't cause you too much problem to get through the rest of this thing. Again, just follow the pattern. See, these just kind of, they increment nicely. This, you're just subtracting. To get this number, you just subtracted this from this number. To get this number, you're going to subtract this from this number. You know, think of it that way as you're filling it out. The principal it's the principal outstanding minus the principal you repaid, gives you the new principal outstanding. Kind of do it in your head like that, and a lot of these it's just a lot easier to see what's going on. All right? Have any problems there, send me an email, and I'll try to answer anything. If you got a problem, it's not coming out right, copy and send me a copy of your spreadsheet, and I'll see if I can help you out that way. But this should give you everything you need to do to manage this entire spreadsheet. It's all pretty simple, all pretty straightforward. Just follow the pattern. Just follow the pattern right down the line. All right? And you should get true answers right across the board. Hope this helps you out, and please let me know if you have any difficulties.